Hey guys, Spacemyname here, and this is the first devlog for Stellaxy 2. This was a stream that I did on YouTube and Twitch. I had a few issues in the middle of it, but I'm going to do my best here to recall everything that happened during the stream. So here I'm trying to figure out why the objects are disappearing so close to the camera. This was kind of a hassle to figure out, mostly because there's a different calculation for positive and negative Z values. And this becomes a trend throughout the rest of the video that you're going to notice, where I really just need one equation for Z values, and it was a lot simpler than I made it out to be. But I over-engineered solutions for each and every different situation that I ran into, until eventually finally coming back down to the solution that I just needed to fix the Z value. So here I'm moving around and checking different locations to make sure that Z values are showing up. Of course, the moon doesn't show up properly, so I immediately know that something's messed up here. You can see me kind of frantically going in here and creating a couple new variables for selection, because I'm trying to kind of figure out well, first of all, I needed to do selection anyway, but I also needed to figure out a way for me to kind of debug some of the situation that was happening. So I worked on kind of both at the same time. Selection was pretty easy to implement because I've done it before, obviously. But what was difficult was kind of tracking the object and then fixing the Z issue, which came back up again here. Here I'm playing with controls mostly, I think, and then I saw a Z fighting issue. So I started instantly going back to the Z fighting issue and trying to debug that and trying to set different heights and things to try to figure out if that's part of the issue. Here I'm comparing, I believe, Neptune and Mars. No, I'm looking at Jupiter and the asteroid belt, trying to figure out why there's Z fighting there. Then I'm comparing it with Neptune here, and I was kind of just wrestling around back and forth with values, trying to figure out what was technically a positive value, what was technically a negative value. And this was a lot of effort for something that doesn't need to happen in the game. And I think this is how I eventually came to this conclusion that I'm already stating multiple times. It is literally just through all of the trial and error that I did. And you can see all the different debug steps that I did here, trying to track different types of objects, trying to plot out the math of like how this could be going wrong. And basically what was happening was, as an object would be on the negative side approaching the positive side, as it hits zero, the value, and this is where I find it, jumps way up. So the Z basically goes to an extreme value that then places it at the very front. And then once it goes to the Z value like 1, which the coordinate system is kind of complicated in the system. The Z value is like 10 to negative 10, and the X value is like several thousand. So it's a little bit of a weird scale because of the way I chose to draw the objects on the screen. But I really liked the way that everything was drawing here. So once I actually figured out the Z fighting issue, which was just, I needed one equation, and that's what I did at the end, is I just put one equation in. And then I started working on selection and kind of how the ship would look. I played around a lot more with controls, mostly trying to get the angles right and the feel right. I ended up caving at the very end here and just implemented essentially Stellaxy's movement system, but on the XZ axis instead of the XY axis, which took a little bit of tweaking back and forth to perfect. But eventually, once I was happy with that, I was sitting here looking at the screen, realizing that the middle of the screen is the only part that's taken up, and I'm going to have to create a mini map. So instead of doing a mini map, I went through this whole process of exploring all kinds of different options and tweaking different variables, trying to see how I could get objects to show up in a way that they would kind of move upwards the farther away that they got, so that way you would be able to see them from far away. I thought about placing the whole solar system just on an axis and basically sliding up and down the Y and Z when moving forward and backwards. This did not really pan out very well because I could not get everything to line up perfectly. There was always some kind of rounding error that would come off, translating between X and Z, or I'm sorry, Z and Y. So I ended up eventually caving and just kind of moving the objects because it just kind of made more sense. And this is where it starts to get a little hectic. So, but first I was playing around with having like a parabolic system where the farther away they would go, they would kind of just slowly move and then completely go off screen. And then I tried using a bunch of different sine waves. And then later, or actually I think right here is the first iteration of it. I pretty much settled on this sine wave. It crashed a bunch of times trying to add more objects just to show it off. Sine wave, exponential, like not really going above the screen, still kind of staying in the middle, but fluctuating enough to where you can see where different objects are, like through the asteroid belt. And this is the main intent of kind of most of this time spent here, really just going back and forth. I ended up looking up some Stellaxy code just to double check some things. I at one point removed the whole thing and just went back to flat, thinking that I would let the player kind of move up and down. And then eventually I did go back to the system of just having that kind of sine wave exponential, kind of space liquid, space fluid, whatever you want to call it. And I think this effect is really cool. I like the way it looks a lot. So much so that I started playing around with some ideas of how to do like a first person Stellaxy. I'm not entirely sold on this idea quite yet. I might change it still. But I did make a gigantic texture just to kind of play around with it and see how like the GUI would work and things like that, which led to yet another Z fighting issue. That Z fighting issue I ended up fixing just by drawing the entire GUI in another sprite batch, begin and end call. So that is it for this whole video. If you guys like this devlog and want to see more Stellaxy, go ahead and follow. This is pretty much all I'm going to be working on. I may bring up other projects, but not likely until they're more finished. This one, I do want to show a little bit more of the entire process. Thanks for watching and have a great day.